Welcome back to Yuanyu Perspectives, where we decode global events through the lens of economics, strategy, and power dynamics. I'm your host, and today's episode dives deep into the chip war, not just as a tech story, but as a war of narratives, leverage, and national sovereignty. Today, we're going to explore why Nvidia's H20 chip exports to China, which at first glance might seem like a tech reprieve, are actually seen by many Chinese economic thinkers as a sophisticated trap. So grab your headphones. Let's talk semiconductors control and why some are calling this digital opium. Part 1. What is the Nvidia H20 and why is it controversial? In June 2024, the U.S. Department of Commerce relaxed some export restrictions on Nvidia's downgraded AI chips to China, especially the H20, unlike the H100 or A100 chips, which are used for training large AI models. The H20 has reduced capabilities. It's primarily built for inference, using existing models rather than training new ones. On paper, this might sound like a win-win. Nvidia gets to make money. Chinese companies get usable chips, and Washington maintains the upper hand by banning more advanced versions. But here's where Chinese experts are sounding the alarm. Many economic commentators in China argue that the H20 isn't just a technical compromise. It's part of a larger geoeconomic strategy to 1. Feed China's tech sector just enough to keep it reliant on U.S. tech. 2. Prevent China from achieving true autonomy in foundational AI capabilities. 3. Create the illusion of cooperation while maintaining strategic choke points. The H20 is seen as a gatekeeping device, not a tool for development, but a leash. Part 2. The digital opium analogy in forums, think tank essays, and Chinese language podcasts. A powerful metaphor has emerged. Digital opium. According to this view, the U.S. is offering China the AI equivalent of addictive but non-nutritive substances. H20 chips give the illusion of capability, but they reinforce dependency, and they stall local innovation, investment, and risk-taking. The concern is that if Chinese firms continue to rely on downgraded imports, they won't build a kind of robust, fully domestic infrastructure needed for true digital sovereignty. Some Chinese tech voices even argue that American policymakers have studied the failures of China's over-reliance on imported semiconductors and are now weaponizing it. This isn't just theory. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo has said publicly that the U.S. wants to allow China access to chips that are good enough to keep their AI economy dependent, but not good enough to threaten U.S. leadership. It's a form of strategic sedation, similar to how opium was used during colonial times. Not to kill the adversary, but to keep them controllable. Part 3. China's domestic response, resistance, or addiction. Here's where the picture gets more complex. Not everyone in China sees the H20 as dangerous. Many large Chinese tech firms, especially those under pressure from shareholders, are welcoming the chip as a short-term solution. After all, cloud providers and AI startups need hardware now, not in 5 years. But a growing number of public intellectuals, economists, and engineers are urging caution. Short-term gain, long-term dependence, warns one popular commentator on Weibo. Engineers on Jihu argue that designing around the H20 introduces unnecessary inefficiencies that hurt China's ability to innovate independently. Tech policy think tanks are increasingly framing the chip debate in terms of national security and economic sovereignty. To make things worse, there's a fear that U.S. firms can remotely disable or monitor these chips, adding a surveillance and kill-switch element to the deal. The result? A civil war of narratives inside China. One side says, take what we can get, stay in the game. The other says, reject the leash, build our own power. Part 4. A battle between Chinese minds on both sides of the Pacific. One of the most fascinating commentaries comes from Chinese economists who point out this paradox. Most of Nvidia's innovations aren't from white Americans. They're from Chinese, Indian, and Taiwanese engineers. This isn't a war between nations. It's a war between Chinese brains on opposite sides of the ocean. This idea reframes the chip war not just as U.S. versus China, but as a global class and talent conflict. Silicon Valley, filled with ethnic Chinese engineers, creates technology. Beijing, filled with state-backed capital and policy momentum, tries to catch up, and Washington tries to play puppet master over both. The implication is clear. The West can't win without Chinese talent, but China can't win if it remains in a subordinate tech role. Part 5. Political system. Another key distinction that Chinese economists highlight is the difference in time horizons. U.S. politicians are focused on 4-year election cycles. China's leadership plans 10, 20, even 50 years ahead. This asymmetry affects how both sides wage the chip war. The U.S. wants quick wins, like starving China of chips. China is investing in education, fabrication, and long-term R&D. The question is not whether China will catch up, but how fast, and at what cost. If Chinese companies take the H20 bait, they may win short-term market share, but lose long-term strategic independence. That's the crux of the warning from China's mainstream economic thinkers. Conclusion: chips are the battlefield, but sovereignty is the prize, so where does that leave us? Nvidia's H20 isn't just a piece of hardware. It's a geopolitical signal, a strategic tool, a test of who will control the future of artificial intelligence, and by extension, the digital world. In the eyes of many in China, this is not about trade. It's not even just about technology. It's about freedom versus control, sovereignty versus submission. And just like in history, the addiction doesn't start with force. It starts with convenience, with compromise, with chips that are good enough. The United States calls itself a democracy, yet throughout its history, it has repeatedly interfered in the internal affairs of other nations through political, economic, and even military means. It has also sought to suppress any country that shows signs of surpassing it, Japan in the 1980s being a notable example. According to mainstream Chinese scholars, only by bravely standing up to America's bullying can a nation secure the freedom and dignity its people rightfully deserve. Thanks for joining me today on Yuanyu Perspectives. If you found this episode thought-provoking, consider sharing it. The real tech war is just beginning, and the battlefield is in your pocket, your data center, and your national strategy. Until next time, stay sharp, stay curious.